So what I want to first just talk about is where we've been the last, Venerable started teaching on the Mahayana paths and grounds last September, and then very 1st of September, and it went through December 15th. And there were some, she traveled some in the interim, and some of us in the community gave talks about the 6 perfections. But she did give 8 talks last fall that related to the Mahayana paths and grounds. And the first talk is what I'm going to focus on tonight. It was an overview. And in that, she went through the paths primarily and also explained the 2 Buddha bodies, the form body and the truth body. And then she went on through the fall to talk about equanimity and developing bodhicitta, which she actually started that first night. And then she went through the 7-point cause and effect. And then she continued with the teachings on the paths and grounds, she got through the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. And where we are on the handout, most of us, and some people online have this available too, I believe. It's like a 40-page handout about, we went through, in those 3 months, we went through pages 10 through 15, essentially, and we were in the middle of page 15. And when she teaches again, I think she'll start up there. So she gave an overview of the 5 paths, the 5 Mahayana paths, and then she went into depth on the first 2. And that's kind of where we're at. And she started then talking about the next phase, but she didn't get into the path of seeing yet. So that's kind of where we're picking things up in terms of this review. And so what I did is I made a handout first because I was trying to get a handle on what we did last fall. And so I went through all of my notes, and then I went through the pages that we went over, and not that I understand much of this, but I realized for me it was helpful to have this kind of the divisions in one place, just of what we went over. So this handout that I have for you, and if people online want it, they can just write the office and I'll email it to them. It's all in this large handout that we have, but it's kind of helpful sometimes to see it. There's a lot of parts to it. And so I went through and put in the definitions, which I still don't understand all of them, but it's still nice to look at them again, and I feel like it will be a process. From going through this today, I realized that what we're going into next, and I went through also the whole handout and looked through everything that's coming up, is I think we'll have a much better sense of these things. So I think it's good that we kind of review what we've done so far, even in terms of some of these definitions. If we don't get to them tonight, take a look at them just for your own mind, because when they're pulled out of all of that, it's a little easier to see, like the trees in the forest, or the forest through the trees, whatever. So, we can, I think we made 10. So we can share and we can print off some more. So at the very beginning here, she's kind of outlining what is it that we're talking about. Previous to these 3 months, we went through the paths and grounds of the hearers and the solitary realizers, the fundamental vehicle. So now we're in the Mahayana vehicle, and you always say the word Mahayana paths when you say it. You just don't say one. The other ones are like hearer paths. So when she started this on that first night, she gave the definition of a Mahayana ground and a Mahayana path, which a Mahayana ground is a clear realizer of one who has entered a Mahayana path, and this is all in your handout, which serves as a basis of the many good qualities which are its effect. What the heck that means. And then a Mahayana path is a Mahayana clear realizer, and they're both synonymous. And so then what she said was, and we will understand this as we go along. And I think it's still kind of in that category, but I think we'll get a sense for it, especially in the things that we're coming up to now, because there'll be a lot more talk about the grounds. She talked about the grounds in general, but not as much detail as we're going to be getting into. So basically, when we talk about the Mahayana grounds, there's 2 main divisions, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, and that's what we went through in the fall. we went through the Bodhisattva common beings, and then we went through part of the Bodhisattva superior beings, or the Bodhisattva superiors. And this, when you talk about the common beings, they're still have not yet had a direct perception of emptiness. So that's why they're considered common beings. They haven't seen reality directly. But within that, in that grounds of Bodhisattva common beings, we have the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. And so it's interesting to look, I think I want to read some of these definitions as we go through. So the grounds of a Bodhisattva common being, the definition of this is a Bodhisattva's clear realizer, which is included within the grounds of belief. And then when they talk about the path of accumulation, which is contained in this, it's a Mahayana clear realizer of the doctrine, and then the path of preparation is a Mahayana clear realizer of the meaning. So that gives us a little sense of when you're on the path of accumulation. It's just, you see the kind of separation there, a clear realizer of the doctrine, but now when you get to the path of preparation, you're starting to understand the meaning. So then I've split out on the path of accumulation that there's, the small, middling, and great, and then on the path of preparation, there's the four main heat, peak, forbearance, and supreme mundane qualities, and each of those has three. We'll talk a little bit about some of these as we go along. I'm just kind of reviewing the handout now. And then at the bottom of that handout, we go into the Bodhisattva superiors, which is now the grounds of Bodhisattva superiors. And that definition of that ground is a Bodhisattva exalted knower, which is affected by both the wisdom, directly realizing emptiness, and great compassion. So mainly what we have there now, when a superior, what we oftentimes call Arya superiors when you hit the path of seeing, is they have realized emptiness directly, and they have great compassion because they're on the, and bodhicitta because they're on the Mahayana paths and grounds. So, and then as we flip over there on the next side, it then gave this definition, which I didn't see this in my notes so much, but then it gives the definition of an ultimate ground of a Bodhisattva superior, which is a Bodhisattva's non-conceptual exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise, whose entity is non-contaminated and which is affected by great compassion, its accompanier. So now we get the sense, we at least can get a sense of what's happening there. This is the non-conceptual exalted wisdom. So you've got this meditative equipoise, it's non-conceptual, and you've got great compassion still there. So you've kind of moved into, as we've explained, the realm of direct perception. And then in that ground, there will be the 10, that's not exactly right. Yeah, that's true. In that ground, there will be the 10 grounds of a bodhisattva. So I listed the names there because we don't hear them very often yet, but we'll be spending a lot of time on these in the near future. Very joyful is the first ground. The stainless is the second. The luminous, the radiant, difficult to overcome, the manifest, the gone afar, the immovable, good intelligence, clouds of dharma, or clouds of doctrine. So those are the 10 bodhisattva grounds, or the 10 bhumis. We oftentimes, and I'll probably use both words interchangeably, so bhumis and grounds are interchangeable. And then, so those are like the causal grounds. You're creating the causes of what? The effect ground, the Mahayana effect ground. And this is synonymous with Buddha grounds. So now you're essentially at the path of no more learning, you're a Buddha. And then, then the definitions and the divisions of that I pulled out. They're a little bit farther along, but Venerable had gone through them. So that's kind of the handout, and now just gives you a little overview and something to refer to as we go through the rest of the teachings. Maybe it will be helpful. It was for me. So then on the first teaching, she gave an overview of the Mahayana paths and grounds. And she started with the path of accumulation. And so what does it take to enter this path? What do you need to have? Well, that's when we first generate spontaneous bodhicitta. That's when it starts. And so this is the mind, it's a very specific mind that wants to become fully enlightened, and it wants this in relationship to alleviating the suffering of all sentient beings. And so in your mind, what would be happening, because it's spontaneous, is when you see a sentient being, you would have this spontaneous, like, I want to relieve their suffering. That's the spontaneity about it. The focus that she talked about later on is the object that's in your mind then, though. Compassion is kind of, like in some of these definitions, they say accompanied by. What's really in your mind when you have bodhicitta, the object is really more enlightenment. And compassion is what's informing it. So the object isn't compassion. Does that make sense? It was kind of confusing to me when she taught it. But it kind of makes sense. I can't say I understand it fully, but at that level it makes sense. I think there's a lot more there. So even to get to that place of the path of accumulation where we have the spontaneous bodhicitta, we have things that we have to have before that. And of course we need to have renunciation, and we have to not only have this determination to be free, but we have to see how the disadvantages in cyclic existence can be overcome. That's part of renunciation that I really want to, not have us forget, because if you only think about it in terms of the sufferings and the disadvantages and wishing to overcome it, you really don't have it, because you also have a recognition at some level of conviction. I'm sure it's not full, because I think you have to have the direct realization of emptiness before all your doubt is gone. But still, you realize that there's a way out, that liberation is possible. And even to get to that point, we have to have an understanding of karma. So those are the earlier parts of the path of the practice that occur before we even enter the first path of the 5. Remember, there's 5 paths. In the Mahayana paths, there's the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. And that's what we'll be talking about tonight. So, the Mahayana path of accumulation, the definition of that is a Mahayana clear realizer of the doctrine. And it has small, middle, and great. At the small level, you can still lose bodhicitta. And it's not like set yet. And there were some great, in later teachings in the fall, some great kind of analogies or metaphors it was really, that explain this. But the main point is to realize that we depend on sentient beings to generate love and compassion. They are the object. And if we give up and lose it for even one, we've lost our bodhicitta, and we're like, boop, kicked out. You're off that path. You aren't in there anymore. But once you get through this small path of accumulation, then, and you get to the middling path of accumulation, you won't lose it. So what we take from that is, really the recognition, even before we get there, that this is possible, and we need to really train our minds to never give up on anyone. And so we start that now, of course. And then in the path of preparation, when do you enter that path? Well, that's when you have, you realize emptiness with an interferential realization. So this is the union of insight and serenity. And so it's not direct. It's not a direct realization or perception. It's a one that's interferential, or one that you've come to through reasoning. But it's not a mind that's discursive, that's for sure. I think these minds are, I think it maybe in the most subtle meditations we've had, we can kind of imagine what it might be like. But now, instead of whatever it was we're meditating on emptiness. And so it's a mind that's reasoning that leads to that, and then get to a place where you have full ability to concentrate, and you combine it with the vipassana or the insight, and it's still at the level of inference. And how long does it take to do these first two paths? One countless great eon. No, for both. And then when the next path is the path of seeing, and you enter that directly when you perceive emptiness non-conceptually. So there's we use cognition is different from conception. Cognition is like the big term, that talks about the mind functioning. A conception is a subset of that. And so when you're doing the path of preparation, that's still conceptual. And then when you're at the path of seeing, it's non-conceptual, but it's still cognition. It's not like you're comatose, So you're functioning. So I think those words are important to be clear with. So when you reach the path of seeing, now you've entered the first ground or the first bhumi. And that's the only one that's associated with the path of seeing. So there are these 10 grounds or 10 bhumis. The first one is with the path of seeing, and the next 9 are with the path of meditation. And you remember when we talked about the fundamental vehicle paths and grounds, there were 8 grounds. 5 paths, the paths had the same names, and there were 8 grounds. In the Mahayana vehicle grounds, there are 10, to get these words right. And so, what are you eliminating then in this path of seeing? So here you're eliminating the acquired afflictions. You're starting to eliminate them. And so now I'm going to rely heavily on my notes so I keep this all straight. Because what I did, and Venerable had advised us to study our notes, study the outlines, and read other sources. And so I used the book Meditation on Emptiness by Jeffrey Hopkins and picked out the parts that really resonated with these teachings and my notes. But I combined, I'm using both. And I was pretty careful not to put in anything that I would confuse anybody with, I hope. At least by being wrong, by stating something that doesn't fit. So what are we eliminating on the path of seeing? So what Jeffrey writes, and this book is actually a translation. It's not Jeffrey talking. He's actually translating a text. So through the path of seeing, a yogi removes artificial conceptions of inherent existence. So it's these conceptions of inherent existence that we're removing, right? This whole presentation that we're studying is from the Prasangika view. There's 4 tenet systems in Tibetan Buddhism, and each of them presents these things differently. And the unique thing about this presentation is it's from the Prasangika view, and so when you read Jeffrey Hopkins, he lays all these out, like what each of the different tenet systems says about things. But tonight we're going to be really taking it from that viewpoint. I really don't have the skill to do anything other than that. That'd be quite daunting. So these, through the path of seeing, a yogi removes artificial conceptions of inherent existence, those acquired not from beginningless conditioning, but from contact with false systems of teaching. So this is the separation we have between what we were calling acquired, and in this book he calls artificial, and innate. And so from beginningless time, we've been being conditioned, and we have innate afflictions from that. Innate afflictions. Yeah, that's right. But there might be obscurations, I think would be a better word. Innate obscurations is a better word, because it really gets confusing if you mix these up. But these are not those. Although these false teachings, things that have wrong view essentially, they fortify these innate misconceptions of inherent existence of both person and phenomena. And you can see that in your own mind, I think. When you really have like, well, even at the level of, we've talked about this, of when you have the wrong view of like things are causeless, you know, and some of the different views we have, if you really look at them, you can see some of them really are reifying things. And sometimes we might go the other way, but we probably tend more to reify things. So, yeah. Let's see. And so what happens here, the false teachings fortify the innate misconception of inherent existence of persons and other phenomena. And this is acquired from beginningless misconception of the nature of things. Beginningless, we've had this kind of fundamental ignorance. And it's overcome on the path of meditation through the continuous conditioning to the truth. So you started on the path of seeing, and then you continue on the path of meditation with this removal. But when you're on the path of seeing, you're really working on these acquired or artificial conceptions of inherent existence. And then he goes on to say that though all artificial conceptions of inherent existence are removed on the first bodhisattva ground, which is essentially the path of seeing, and though during meditative equipoise the innate conception of inherent existence is dormant, so that means when you're in meditation, direct realization of emptiness, when you're on the path of seeing, you don't have the innate conception of inherent existence is dormant. You're not seeing that. You're only seeing emptiness, of direct perception of emptiness. But a conception of inherent existence can arise again outside of that direct contemplation of emptiness. So although we're on the, we have a direct perception when we're on the cushion, so to speak, when you're in meditative equipoise. But when you get up, it's not there. And this is, we'll get into this pretty soon here with some of the stuff that Guy Newland talks about with channel A and channel B and stuff like that. But that's really more on the path of meditation. And so in each of these I'm trying to say, when do you enter? And I didn't find it in my notes, although I read those last night and it was pretty late. And I didn't find it in meditation on emptiness, so I'm not sure on that. And I know when we were in the other vehicle, it was a little hard, but when we were in the fundamental vehicle, it was you enter the path of meditation when you're having eliminated all acquired afflictions and then beginning to abandon the innate afflictions. And I think that would be the same here. But I didn't find it anywhere, and so I always give a little caveat. And we haven't talked about that yet in any detail. We've only gone through the first two paths. So those will be coming up. So, okay, so essentially then when you're on the path of meditation, you're now on the grounds 2 through 10, right? So there's 9 grounds in the path of meditation. Are you following? So you have the 10 grounds, or 10 bhumis. You do the first one on the path of seeing, and you do the next 9 on the path of meditation. That's just how they split out. And I have to say, I wrote, if people are interested in this, I'll send you my notes, and I put page numbers in here because Jeffrey has a lot of charts, and I found those really helpful to make sense of things, and that's a little bit what we're going to focus on tonight. We'll see how clear it is. But I was kind of really wanting to understand these afflictions and which ones are going when, so that's kind of the focus here. So now we're eliminating, so we're on these bhumis, 2 through 10, and we're eliminating the innate afflictions. And we're on the path of meditation, right? So the grosser or artificial stains that were removed on the path of seeing, but now the path of meditation, you're working on more subtle stains. And this is the innate sense of inherent, true, natural, or objective existence. And these are what are removed on this path of meditation, but not temporarily, but forever, and they never arise again. So how do we go about this? As we develop over stages, each one of those grounds, you're gaining more and more qualities and such, and our realizations are deepening. And we're abandoning these 9 levels of obscurations. And this is where, when we were doing the fundamental vehicle, we had the 81 81 afflictions, and they were broken into 9 groups, although some of that is a little confusing. So on each ground in the path of meditation, a bodhisattva abandons varying degrees of the innate conception of inherent existence and the poisons that it induces, along with their seeds. That's kind of where we live. We have the innate, we have this grasping at inherent existence, and we're not really aware of it. We can't discern most of this stuff, but we have the poisons that it induces. That's why we get angry and do all the things we do. And then we create a lot of seeds from that. But now you're starting to clean all that out. And these objects of abandonment, these things we want to get rid of, they're arranged in relation to the 3 desire realms and 9 levels. And so in Jeffrey Hopkins on page 104, I don't know that I get this fully, but I have a feeling we'll get into this more in the near future with Venerable. But it basically lays out the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. And then for the first one, the desire realm, there actually are, remember how we had the big, and all those, and then it went down all the way to small, small. Well, that's what we have here, and I think I tried to put this on here. I might have given up at that point because it was getting too long. Yeah, I did. So it's a little easier. It's even still confusing on here because the way the numbering goes, I'm a little thrown, but I'll be clear about what I say to you because there's part of this that is a little confusing to me. Let's see. So essentially what it does is you're talking about removing afflictions from your mind stream. And essentially these 9 categories essentially will cover all of samsaric existence within them. And so that's how, in one sense, they're split into the desire, form, and formless realm. Yeah. So as Jeffrey says, it essentially puts into a condensed form all the possible states of rebirth in cyclic existence. So the conception of inherent existence, and this is the part I was always trying, these 81 things, were like, what are they? What's contained in those? And essentially he's saying the conception of inherent existence and its attendant afflictions are divided into 81 steps. So essentially it's the conceptions we have of inherent existence, which probably relates to all these different kinds of dualistic thought that we have, which I think there are, Venerable mentioned 4. I only got 3 in my notes. But that, and then all the different afflictions that come up related to it. So this is where we have the big, the middle big, and the small big. And then we have the big middle, and the small middle. And the big small, middle small, and small small. Okay, you there? We can remember that. So then, and then in the Prasangika view, they assert that no one proceeds through these 81 steps one at a time. You don't go one by one. What they assert is that the 9 big innate afflictions are simultaneously abandoned. So you do those, boom, all at once. And then the 9 middling big are simultaneously abandoned. And it really becomes much less confusing when you look at the chart of what's being abandoned on what ground. And you think it's going to go quite even, but it actually doesn't go, it's not like, it's not straight across, but it is sequential. And so it ends up that it splits across the various, actually grounds 2 through 8 is where you abandon these 81 innate afflictions. And there's a chart that shows this in Jeffrey Hopkins, page 106. And it makes it clearer. And then he has another chart on page 109 that shows what happens after that when you're on grounds 8 through 10, and there you're abandoning the 4 degrees of obstructions to omniscience. So we always talk about these kind of afflictions, the ones that are, what do you call that? Obstructions to omniscience. Why aren't we seeing like a Buddha sees? And why doesn't an Arhat see like a Buddha sees? Because, when you get to a certain point in the Mahayana grounds, you're the same as an arhat. We'll make that very clear here in a little bit. But then you go beyond and you get rid of the things that are keeping you from having an omniscient mind. And so there are like 4 degrees of that are explained. Okay. So then Venerable explained that we call the bhumis 1 through 7 the impure grounds, and we call 8 through 10 the pure grounds. And so the ones, the 1 through 7, the impure grounds, are called that because they still have afflictive obscurations. And these are the ones that keep you in cyclic existence, the ones that arhats are getting rid of. And then they also have the pure grounds, the bhumis 8 through 10. And this is, now your afflictive obscurations are gone, and you're called pure because you're, now starting to, you've purified those, and now you're working on the innate afflictions. So remember, an arhat is in the fundamental vehicle, and they've gotten themselves out of samsara, right? So they have the same 5, they have 5 paths with the same names, but they're getting rid of different things. And they get to the point where they get rid of, what they're doing is the same. They explain this quite at length in here, like this is, from the prasangika view, the belief is that it's the same object that's being abandoned there. It's the same experience at that level of the direct realization of emptiness and how it's used, and you're getting rid of these same afflictions. But what's the main difference is that in the Mahayana path, you've got this whole countless great eons of merit and this, developing this compassion and this bodhicitta that's like in your mind stream. It may not be manifest then, but it's not like it's gone. So it's quite a different situation. So then in page 300 in Jeffrey Hopkins' book, he talks about, he has the 4 tenet systems there, and Venerable's given us this before. And this is where the view on what are the obstructions that you're getting rid of, right? And this is where I'm going to kind of try to explain a little bit more of these afflictions, the afflictive obscurations and the cognitive obscurations or obstructions. Venerable uses obscurations and Jeffrey uses obstructions. They're the same. And so we're going to just talk about the prasangika view. And so, but that table tells you what each of the 4 tenet systems, what they are abandoning. So, okay, so we've got these 2 main categories now that we're going to talk about of obstructions or obscurations, afflictive and cognitive. The afflictive ones, these are the ones that the arhats get rid of, right? And they get out of cyclic existence. And from the prasangika view, there are 2 levels, coarse and subtle. Coarse afflictive obscurations and subtle afflictive obscurations. And so the coarse one is the conception of a self-sufficient person, that self-sufficient, SSSE, substantially existent. And that's like this sense you have in you of like, there's somebody in here controlling this body and mind. There's like an owner, there's a controller. When you think that you can not get sick and I can control my mind and I can control my body, that sense of that thing, that's that one. That's something to do with that one at the level I can understand it. And that's the coarse level. And if you get rid of that conception completely, you're not going to be out of cyclic existence according to the prasangika view. Some of the other tenet systems hold that view, but that not the prasangika feel that everyone who gets out, the arhats and everyone, they've gone beyond that. And they've gotten to the subtle afflictive obscuration, and they've gotten rid of that, which is this conception of persons and other phenomena as inherently existent. So that's the big ticket item in the prasangika view is this fundamental ignorance that reifies things and sees things as inherently existent, putting something there that isn't. And when you eliminate those, you've freed yourself from cyclic existence if you're on the fundamental vehicle path. On the other 2 then, or the other one is the cognitive obstructions. And these are the latencies of afflictions. And that's when they talk about the the pot that had cooked onions, and you got rid of the onions, but now you still have the smell of the onions in the pot. These are like latencies of afflictions. So this is this factor in the mind that has the mistaken appearance of true existence, or mistaken perception of true existence. Venerable was saying that the word is kind of in between perception and appearance, but it's that part of our mind that perceives things to be, there's really a book here, there's really a clock here, we have no, it just exists from its own side. We can't see the dependent arising in all its myriad causes and conditions, parts, and that we just merely label this. I mean, if you ask our cat if this is a clock, this does not function as a clock for our cat. She does not tell time with this, but she does find it to be a great toy sometimes, And so that's the mere labeling. We label it as that, and it works for us, and it functions that way because it's suitable to do that. This is not very suitable to tell the time. You could call it a clock, but it won't work, right? So this is the part, it looks like a clock from its own side. It's a book from its own side. I'm a person from my own side. So that's how it appears. Things appear. And so in the Prasangika view, there's no coarse cognitive obscuration. There are in some of the other tenet systems, but there is a subtle one, and this subtle one is the subtle obstruction to omniscience. This is the appearance of inherent existence, the stains of conceiving the two truths as different entities. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, so hold on to that. It sounds kind of just like a bunch of words maybe right now, but basically one thing that when you get through that and you break through that, you're a Buddha, right? And then the ultimate truth and the conventional truth, you see them simultaneously. Like before, when you were sitting down and you're at the place where you can directly realize emptiness, when you got up, everything looks the same. Oh, of course you remember your experience on the cushion. But when you're a Buddha, those two things are simultaneous. You can, as Guy always calls it, channel A and channel B. You have to be on one or the other until you get to be a Buddha, and then you can play both stations at the same time. He calls it, a radio, like channel A, channel B. Okay, so we're still in the path of meditation, and now we're going to talk a little bit about going from the 7th to the 8th ground, or the 7th or 8th bhumi, because this is where the big shift happens. So what's happening here? What are you eliminating? Well, at the end of the 7th ground, we call it the uninterrupted path of the 7th ground, is the moment when you're eliminating this last of these afflictive obscurations, and that's exactly what Arhat has done. And then, boom, you go into the 8th bhumi, and now you're going to start. You're done with those afflictive ones, and now you're going to work on the cognitive obscurations, or the ones that prevent you from seeing all phenomena, prevent you from being omniscient. These 4 degrees of obstructions to omniscience, and that's what you're going to spend your time doing on the last 3 grounds. The 7th ground, or the 8th ground, one of these kind of splits. It's not like all the same on that. I think it was the 8th ground. You're doing some things on the 8th ground that sounded similar to the 7th, but it doesn't matter. That's the basic theme. So then Jeffrey explains this, and I think this kind of puts it together a little bit, hopefully. So a yogi who has attained the direct realization of emptiness can't remain in that realization while perceiving phenomena qualified by emptiness. So that means, and he also can't perceive phenomena while directly realizing emptiness, right? Just what we were saying. It's like one or the other. You're on channel A or on channel B. You're going to either see the emptiness of the object, and that's all you're seeing, or you're going to see the object. So that's where you're at when you have the direct realization of emptiness, which is like path of seeing. So then when you get up, you lose that direct cognition of emptiness. When you arise from meditative equipoise, it's gone. Because the appearance of conventional phenomena rules out this direct perception of emptiness. And vice versa, the direct cognition of emptiness rules out being able to see conventional phenomena. I think this is when they explain that thing of like an eye can't hear sounds and a nose can't see you, and it's like it just doesn't happen unless you're omniscient. Then they say that does happen, but because they got channel A and channel B kind of simultaneously. But for the rest of us, we don't smell sights. And we don't hear, touch, tangible objects. Well, unless they fall, but we hear the sound of them. Okay. Let's see. So then, in terms of the two truths, this is kind of trying to explain that point. So in terms of how emptiness and other phenomena appear to that person, the two truths seem contradictory. Because, and this, they seem contradictory because you look at it and it seems like it's inherently existence, but when you sit down, you can't even find the thing. All you can see is the emptiness. And so it's kind of this contradiction. And what is that? This is what the translation says, such are the obstructions to omniscience. So that's, and why, yeah, I think that's pretty clear. Okay, so we can skip the next part. Oh yeah, no, I guess that was it. Okay, so omniscience has this simultaneous realization by one consciousness of all phenomena, both the phenomena that are qualified by emptiness and the emptiness itself. Okay, so we know this thing is empty because when we were meditating on it, we had direct perception. When we got done, we remembered what we were doing. So hey, that's empty. Although it doesn't look empty to me now because I'm not meditating. But then, when you remember that you did, and you know it, but you don't see it. The appearance is there. But when you're omniscient, that doesn't happen. One consciousness, one moment of consciousness can hold both of those. Both the object, which is qualified by emptiness, it has the quality of emptiness, and you can see the emptiness of it at the same time. So a bodhisattva has a great wish to rid himself of this obstruction because it prevents him from knowing those things that make attempts to help other beings fruitful. That's kind of what it's all about. All through these 10 grounds, the bodhisattva, even though they haven't even, they're just doing so much during those 10 grounds, this is like the motivation. They know if they can go all the way to Buddhahood and have this omniscient mind, then when they interact with others, they'll have all their qualities fully developed, and they'll have more chance of what they're doing being helpful, being fruitful. And before that time, you're like limited, and so they can understand that, and so they want to keep going. So how long does this all take? So the Bhumi 1 through 7 takes another countless great eon. And then Bhumis 8 through 10 take another one countless great eon. And then they talk about that the Vajrayana path is, Venerable says it's quicker, but it's not easy. So as we go through the 10 grounds, the good qualities that you are developing are enhanced. And we just touched on this at the very last talk that she gave, for the last 2. And one, although I think she might have talked about this the first one too, but then it comes back to it. And then I think we'll be spending a lot of time on this in the next portion of the teachings. But there are these 4 features that they talk about. And one is that the number of good qualities increases higher and higher as you move from one ground to the next. And there's lists in here that are kind of fun to read of all these things that you can do, 100 of these, and all these things that you can do, and it's worth reading because everything makes more sense when you read what they can do. But we can't do everything tonight. And then there's the majesty of power is higher and higher, so you have more power to do things. And then which far-reaching practice, how we have the 10 perfections. There's 6, but then they expand it to 10. So there's the 6 of generosity, ethics, fortitude, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom, and then the next 4 I don't have memorized, but there are things like power and prayers, and I don't know. There's I think one that relates to kind of wisdom. I don't have those memorized.
Non-dual wisdom.
Non-dual wisdom, and there's another. Anyway, those things. So there's 10 of them, and they're easy. We'll get to that in here. And they're easy to look up and everything. But each ground, you're actually bringing one of those to fulfillment. So on the first ground, you're going to like the first of the 10 grounds, you're going to be bringing to fulfillment the perfection of giving, of generosity, and then it just works its way up. So this kind of, when Venerable has taught this, she's kind of given us this big picture, and then we're going to get into more detail as we go through. And then the fourth thing, the fourth kind of feature of moving through these grounds is that the kind of rebirths that or results change, and so you have more ability to make more emanations and things like that. And then when you get through all this, this is the Mahayana causal grounds that we've been talking about, then you're going to go get to the Mahayana effect ground, which is like the Buddha grounds, the path of no more learning. And so we'll just go through the definitions quickly. A Buddha ground is posited. They don't say it's defined. They say the definition is posited as a final exalted wisdom which possesses the supreme of all aspects. And then they say the Mahayana path of no more learning is posited as a Mahayana clear realizer which has abandoned exhaustively the two obscurations. So everything we've been talking about tonight. And then Venerable went and talked about the two bodies of a Buddha. And so we'll finish with that. And so basically, once we get to the effect ground, this path, which is the path of no more learning, we're a Buddha. And so what is that? And how do we get there? Well, we kind of get a sense of how we got there, but if you really boil it down to the easiest way to think of it, we have the collections of merit and the collections of wisdom. And the whole path from this presentation is from the sutra view of paths and grounds, and the whole, it's said that the whole of the 6 perfections, method and wisdom is the 6 perfections. So everything you need to practice is in the 6 perfections. The whole of the aspects of the method and the wisdom side of the path. So, but then, when you become a Buddha, what is the divisions, right? This thing is all about definitions and divisions, right? So one way the divisions, one way to divide it is 2. There's a truth body, and there's a form body. What we know as the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya. So the truth body, the Dharmakaya, is the fulfillment of your own purposes, and the form body, the Rupakaya, is the fulfillment of others' purposes. Because with the first one, you're kind of cleaning out your mind, developing all your good qualities and all the wisdom and everything you've developed. And why? You need to have these form bodies so you can do something for somebody else. So the truth body can be divided into, one way to divide it is into 2. And that is the truth body, the wisdom truth body, and the nature truth body. The Janakaya and the Svabhavikakaya. Svabhavikakaya. That's not right. It's phonetic. So anyway, you have the wisdom truth body, and this is the omniscient mind. It's also called the ultimate true path. And, well actually, let me go back. The truth body, it's interesting how they say this. We talk about that was the collection of wisdom, but they say the imprint of having completed the collection of wisdom. And then the same for the form body. It's the imprint of having completed the collection of merit, which is the conventional body. And the imprint of having completed the collection of wisdom is the ultimate body. So then this truth body, this Dharmakaya, has the wisdom truth body and the nature truth body. And so this wisdom truth body, here's how Jeffrey explains this. This made sense. When the wisdom of meditative equipoise at the end of a yogi's continuum is a sentient being, so that's his last moment of being a samsaric sentient being. So he's on this uninterrupted path. His consciousness is directly realizing emptiness. And when it becomes the final path of release, then this wisdom of meditative equipoise itself becomes the wisdom body. That's exactly what the book said. This wisdom of meditative equipoise itself becomes the wisdom body, a composite in one entity of both meditative equipoise and subsequent attainment. This means that all phenomena, emptiness, and conventionalities are directly cognized all the time. So that's how you got there. If you can understand it, you might be able to do it. That is page 119 in Meditation on Emptiness. And then he goes on the same page to explain that the nature truth body, the emptiness of this final uninterrupted path becomes the nature body, the absence of all obstructions in the continuum of a Buddha. So it's the emptiness of it that becomes. And this is where I think that as a community, we should spend some time reading this page 119. This would really inform a lot of our debates that we've had even in the last week. There's a lot of things there about, how we debate of like, the whole thing we had about Buddha nature and Buddha potential and when everything is happening. This would be interesting for us to look at. And then as we'll get into, soon, at least Jeffrey has in his book, and I imagine we'll get into, there's 5 qualities of this nature truth body. And they're on page 120, and reading those will give you a feel for what they are. It's a quick list. And then the form body, the Rupakaya, which was the second of, we divided things into 2, right? That also can be divided into 2. There's more, you can divide things a little bit more, but we're just going that far because it gets the main points. So of what Venerable talked about, she went through some of this. So we have the complete enjoyment body, which she calls the resource enjoyment body, what most of us know as the Sambhogakaya. And then we have the emanation body, or the Nirmanakaya. And so the Sambhogakaya, the Buddhas only have one of those. Whereas the emanation bodies, they can make endless amounts of them, I guess. And so Venerable talked about this, but this helped me to have a little bit more. My notes weren't so great, but she said that this enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya, the resource or enjoyment body, abides in the highest pure land, Akanishta, which are above the 17 lands of the form realms. So it's the highest. And each Buddha has his own highest pure land, and it's produced by his limitless collections of merit and wisdom, and is as vast as space. It's achieved from a portion of his wisdom, which is interesting because we're on the method side here, and it's not composed of particles of matter. Where is it? And it has 5 qualities. So that's page 121 and 122 will give you those qualities. And then the emanation body, these are the forms that sentient beings can see. See, that's the problem with these enjoyment bodies, the Sambhogakaya. They teach in the Pure Lands, and you've got to be like an Arya Bodhisattva. You've got to be, I think, at ground 8 or 7 or 8 before you're going to see them. So that's why, I have some faith that I don't, like when Atisha went to Bodh and the statue of Tara was speaking to him, it's because he had gotten to a certain point on the path where it's like, hi, Tara, there's no problem. And so that's what we're headed for, Well, there'll be a time where we'll be able to, just go to the Pure Lands and get as many teachings as we want, and we'll be, speeding along because we're having so many teachings. But right now, it's emanation bodies. So we had Shakyamuni Buddha, right? The Buddha of our time. And so when Venerable spoke about this, she said, all of these are of one nature and emanated simultaneously. So, and then she spoke a little bit more about the emanation body, but I think it might have been, I think it's mostly related to the emanation body. She said that a Buddha's mind is so habituated to benefiting others that it's just, and because they don't have any afflictions, it's just completely spontaneous, and it's effortless, according to Jeffrey. And so Buddhas are always manifesting in the ways that are most beneficial for us, and they know what's most beneficial for us because they're omniscient. So the thing is on our side, we need to purify and become this upright pot so that we can have fewer afflictions, so we can make some contact with them. That's what Venerable said. And then what Jeffrey says about these emanation bodies is there's three main types. Artisans, like maybe a guitarist or a goldsmith or a scribe is what he said. So, and then constructions, like where sometimes you say like a tree or a bridge or something. And then supreme beings, like Shakyamuni Buddha, who they display the 12 activities of a bodhisattva who becomes a Buddha. So these are the three main ways that there are emanation bodies. And they respond to sentient beings' needs throughout time and space. These emanation bodies appear. They perform their task without effort, and then they're withdrawn. Just like when we do our visualizations, we send out all these Buddhas and they come back in and dissolve. And as sentient beings, whether we notice them or not, that depends on our fortune, our good fortune. If we've made kind of potencies in our mind by virtuous or non-virtuous deeds, that's what's going to set the whole thing up for us. So that's why we need to keep clearing out our afflictions, purifying, and making our minds like you cultivate a garden. If you ever try to grow carrots and the soil is coarse, they split. And it just doesn't go, and if you don't even have that good of soil, you can't even grow things. And so this is the thing, we're always just purifying our mind. So we get to a place like a Sangha, is it, or Maitreya? A Sangha saw Maitreya, that was the thing. 12 years, right? It took him 12 years to get his mind purified enough that he could see Maitreya, although Maitreya was there all the time. And so this is that's why everybody loves that story, because he ran down the hill 3 or 4 times, and he saw people doing kind of outrageous things like sharpening something into a pointed needle with like a feather, and stuff like that. And he goes, well, if they can do that, I guess I can go back up in my cave, So it's this way to inspire ourselves when things seem impossible to keep going. And then someday your mind will be clear enough. You have to have some conviction in this, that there's some sense to this, and there's His Holiness tells stories. If you listen to his teachings, he doesn't tell stories about his own experience, but he tells stories every once in a while of people he has no reason to doubt that he's talked to that have had experiences that fit with these things that we're reading about. I've heard him tell a story of a monk who was in prison for many, many years. Then he was out, nothing to gain, nothing at all to gain. And he was teaching this one text, and all the lineage of that text appeared on the wooden beam, just like really in relief, all the time while he was teaching this text. I've heard, teaching, and it's just kind of scattered in, these little things like that. He's told a number of them, maybe one each teaching. Okay, so as long as space exists, the various activities of Buddha, arising from great compassion, come into existence spontaneously and continuously. So that's pretty fantastic. That's our little overview. So if you asked a question, I probably wouldn't know an answer. But if you had a comment, you could say anything you want. I'd have to look up anything. Does anyone have anything? My clock's a little, we have a couple minutes if anyone has. Yeah?
You said the path of accumulation and preparation, this takes 2 great eons?
One.
And then 1 eon on the path of
First 7.
On the path of meditation?
No, one countless great eon was for the path of accumulation and preparation. Mm-hmm. 1 was for the first 7 bhumis, and 1 was for bhumis 8 through 10. So 3 countless great eons.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I want to come to this point because I always talk about this.
3, and that's where the 3 are split out, according to what Venerable taught. And it was.
Another question is, can you explain it different? I couldn't really get these 2 Dhammakayas.
Yeah, sure, I can try. Not without my notes, so I wouldn't dare. Okay, so there's the nature, the wisdom truth body, and the nature truth body. Okay. Okay, so the Dharmakaya, the truth body, this is the one, remember in general, it's the fulfillment of our own purposes. So it kind of relates more to the side of wisdom. We need wisdom. And you got there by completing the collection of wisdom. It's an ultimate body. It's so the wisdom truth body is the omniscient mind, okay? And the nature truth body is the emptiness. Now, let me see how Venerable says it, because she always makes it so easy. The emptiness of a Buddha's mind and the true cessations. That's the, start there to think of it. So you have the first one, which is the omniscient mind, and then you have the, which is the wisdom truth body, and then you have the nature truth body, which is the emptiness of that mind and the true cessations. It's a little easier. Let me look at the 5 qualities of that, because when you read the qualities, it kind of like makes more sense. That's like a bunch of words, but what the heck does it mean? I don't know. We have a couple minutes, so. The nature body has 5 qualities. Non-production, because of having no production, duration, or disintegration, and no beginning, middle, or end. Non-difference, because of being undifferentiable from the final nature of phenomena in terms of not being different entity from phenomena. Non-perversity, it has not fallen into the 2 extremes of reification, of what does not exist and the denial of what does not exist. Purity, it's free of all the afflictive obscurations. And clear light. So in my mind, that was hard to understand. So we'll have to wait till Venerable comes to it, because the whole rest of the text is going to get into all this stuff. But so I think if you think of it in the simple way first, just to get the kind of category going in your mind, there's the omniscient mind, and then the emptiness of that, along with the cessations. I think that it's better to start there. This stuff is hard to understand. But wait till next year, and we'll all be farther along. Okay, so I think we should dedicate. So may we always have this human mind and this precious human rebirth with this kind of mental continuum that can discern in this way. Our little kitty here may have great, you see, she knows we're talking about her, but she can't understand anything of this teaching probably. And so we need to have a human consciousness and a precious human rebirth in order to even get even able to say the words and try to understand them. So may we always have this and not take it for granted, and try to use our time clearing away all of our afflictions and our, all the different things we've done in the past that are just creating obstacles and problems for us, being able to understand things and keep creating merit and doing constructive things, because those together are basically all we need to do to follow this path to complete awakening, so that we can be of benefit to every being. And so may we do that so that everyone we meet, we are able to be in a position to be of benefit, of the greatest benefit. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.